Hello and welcome. We're going to look at layer mask today, and I've got this image up here that you may have seen already with the colorful leaves, some fall colors in here. We're going to experiment with some layer masks to hopefully help you better understand how layers work along with layer masks. If I add another layer to this, and what I'm going to do is copy this image and just create another layer of it, and I'm going to just hold down the control key and press the letter J, which will give me an exact copy of the background, and it says background copy. There's no difference between this one and the one below it. Now I'm going to do that one more time. I don't want to mess with the original background in case I need to come back to that. So I'm going to make one more copy of this being exactly the same. So I'm going to do Control J again. Now, nothing different between the original and either one of these. Okay? I'm going to go down here to the second copy, or the first copy of the background. Let's turn that one off so you can see this. I'm going to blur the entire background. So I'm going to go to Filter, down to Blur, and I'm going to go to Gaussian Blur. And I want this to be a significant blur, and you can see it's very much blurred. I'm going to blur it maybe just a little bit more. Click OK. Now, the original layer is still there. It's unharmed. And that's the way I like to work. Just keep it here and don't touch it. Then this copy is the blurred copy. This copy, when I turn the eyeball on, is also a good copy. So this should help a little bit visually understand the stacking order in layers. Whatever is on top pretty much dominates the rest of what's below. If it's full screen, otherwise if it fills the entire area, then it's going to completely cover what's below it, right? So that's what's happened here. This layer is the same size as everything else, so it covers up this blur. Now, if I add some more layers, I've got a little what's called a group. You can always add images and kind of hide those with this little file folder right here, and you can call that group whatever you want. But if I turn this little arrow, you'll see what else I've got hiding there. If I turn this top one on, you'll see it's a picture of a deer. Well, it's a much smaller image, so it doesn't fill the screen, so it only hides what's the same size as this. It hides that area that's underneath down here. If I turn this off, you see it's hiding only that part of this blurred one that's the same size as this. Alright, but you're able to look through and see everything else except what this is on top of over here in the layers palette. If I turn this image on of a railroad crossing sign, it's also not as big as the rest of the image, but it is covering, whatever the same size area is underneath it. Now, since the deer is the very top thing, if I move the deer over where the railroad crossing is, guess what happens? That's right, it covers whatever is the same size as itself. So you see the stacking over here, stacking order over here. The deer is the first thing, and we'll just name these real quick. Now if I change the stacking order, and if I go in here to the layers and I move this layer, let me go ahead and move that out. I'll move this layer underneath the railroad crossing layer. So now the railroad sign is the topmost layer. I'm getting my words all mixed up today. So if I click and drag it, it's now going to cover the deer because it's larger than the deer and it's the layer that's at the very top. If I brought in another item, and let's just do that real quick. I'm going to bring up bridge, and I'm just going to go get, we'll get this, what I think is an ox. I'm just going to tell it to go ahead and open that in Photoshop. And of course, it's going to open it up in its own place. I'm going to select this and bring it into our other image, which is over here. I'm going to just do a Control A, which selects everything, a Control C, which copies everything, go back to this layer and do a Control V as in victory, and look, it's so big it covers everything and then some. So how in the world am I going to make that show? Well, here's what we do. We first of all make this image smaller. So I'm going to do a Control minus several times. Now I need to transform that so we can make it fit. So I'm going to do a Control T. That's why I made it so small, because otherwise you wouldn't have seen this bounding box to work on it. So I'm going to hold down my Shift key so I can transform this and keep perspective. Then I let go, I hit enter. Now how do we get this image to be full screen again? Control 0, that's right. So you see the space that this occupies, it's over those other two things because it's at the top of the layers palette as well. Again, if I click and drag the deer and bring it up to the top of the layers palette and let go, the deer is the topmost thing. And I can move it and cover whatever. I can also move the railroad sign up to the top. So hopefully this will show you the importance of the stacking order in the layers palette. What's on top is right here. What's second is right here. It's over many things, but under the topmost. Okay. Now I'm going to hide these. I'm actually going to put the ox back on top real quick, and I'm going to move it into the same group folder as everything else was in. So I'm going to turn that off real quick and make them invisible. Turn their little eyeball off. So now we don't have that in the way. I'm going to turn background copy layer 2 back on, and I'm going to experiment a little bit with layer mask. So right down here at the bottom of the layers palette is the square donut. We've got the little chain link icon, the FX for special effects is next, and then the square with the circle in it. That's, you see it right there maybe. Add layer mask is what this icon is. It will add that layer mask to whatever layer is highlighted. Well, I don't want it up there, so I'm going to undo that, Control Z, and I put it on the layer that I want it actually on. I highlight background layer 2, go back and click the Add Layer Mask, and now I've got this nice white box here. Now what's going to happen in this white box, if this is highlighted instead of the box, you can't do anything with that layer mask. It just simply will not work. So what we do is make sure that's highlighted, and then we turn on a brush. So we can just hit the letter B or go over to the tool palette, get the very first tool that's there, the brush tool. Now keep in mind that what we're going to be doing is painting inside this box, and this box just represents this entire picture frame. Okay, just like this box represents the pictures you see it now. This box is the full frame, but it has nothing in it yet. What it's doing this frame is covering what's below it, because remember the stacking order. If we turn that off again, we see the blur. Now, if I paint with black, you can only paint with black and white and grays in here. So if I paint with black, black reveals. Here's the key to this. Black reveals and white hides. So if I come up here, and usually you want to get a smaller brush, but for this we're just going to do this kind of rapidly, so I'm using a large brush, and I'm painting. If you get over here and you see black over white, if you don't see that, press the D key on your keyboard, D as in dog, and if black isn't on top, just press the letter X as in X-ray, and you can switch the colors back and forth, just like this. Alright, so black on top. Now black reveals. What's it revealing? Well, if we go real quick, it's revealing this layer right here. See? Now, to do this in a little more artistic manner, I'm going to do Control-Alt-Z and undo that. And I'm going to paint like I've got a real mission here to actually accomplish something. Make that brush a little bit smaller with the left bracket key. And I'm just going to paint right up here. And around this edge here. And up in there. I'm going to go ahead and come down here. And I'm going to go ahead and blur or reveal the layer underneath this in several areas. So you can kind of get this little bit of a 3D effect going on here. Now if I go too far, can you see the 3D effect I'm talking about? You still see back into the woods, although it's pretty blurred. Maybe we've gone too far getting rid of some of the other stuff, or maybe we haven't gone far enough. But here's the trick. If I want to bring some of it back, let's say I did that, all I have to do is press the letter X to change this to white. Now when I paint, it reveals or hides the information that's underneath here. If I switch it back to black, we're letting the layer underneath show through again. So I'm going to make my layer or my brush smaller, left bracket key, and I'm going to kind of get in here in the cracks and crevices a little bit. Just get rid of the stuff I don't want to show. And you can really, fine tune this. I'm going to switch to white and paint a little bit of this up here back in. Now let's say I want some of this down here to come back. Or I can make a lot of it come back. Larger brush. Now it's kind of all or nothing, right? I'll paint that back in again. Well, we can keep it from being all or nothing. We can change the brush opacity up here to like 30%, and then it gradually paints in. So I'm going to hide some of the stuff that's below a little bit at a time. So we gradually go back into the image. And you can see over here there's gray showing up now inside this mask. All of the areas where you see the black in this layer mask is completely revealing what's underneath, which is this. The grays, which are down here, are only partially hiding this layer and letting the colors down here show through. Where it's white, you can't see anything from the background layer copy. You can't see any of that here because it's pure white. So this shows through. I'm going to get rid of these two real quick, these two layers. I'm just going to hit the backspace key and get rid of those, or I can take them down to the little trash icon and get rid of them. What I'm going to do, I'm going to recreate that again. I'm going to do 2 Control J's, and this time I think I can make that pop a little better. I'm going to turn that top layer off there, and I'm going to go back to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and this time I'm going to cut that down some. Not make it quite so dramatic. I turn this back on, and then you will not be able to see this. So it goes back to that layer. Alright, I'm going to come up to the background copy 3, which is the topmost layer. I'm going to click on the little layer mask icon, and white's on top over here, so I need to switch that to black. And once again, I'm going to paint, but notice our opacity is on 26, so I'm going to run that up, and now I'm going to paint. And I think you'll see that 3D effect I mentioned a little bit better with the background not being totally smeared. I really think that if the person had the right image to work this on, you could probably come up with your own little unique way of presenting images like this and have a market. Okay, again, I'm going to bring some of this back, probably stuff that's through here. So I'm going to paint with white, so I can just press the letter X and do the same thing. And I'm going to change the opacity down around 30, and I'm going to just paint little brush strokes, get that foreground to come back. So you see, we are controlling how much of this layer is coming through to this. Now we can fine tune it again with the, switch that a little bit here, see if we can soften. You can soften these edges up if you want to. I like them to be sharp, so I'm painting repeatedly on those, some of those edges. I'm going to switch again, soften this up here, and I'm clicking and dragging just a little bit. So I really want these colors to blast and shoot out there. Let me get rid of, soften some of that up, paint it in, paint it in. So hopefully you can see what the layer mask has done there by partially letting things show through on the top layer to the bottom layer. Now let's demonstrate something else here real quick. I'm going to open this image up, or this group up, and bring the deer back to life. And let's just say we want this deer to be down here at the bottom of this picture. We want it to kind of fit in. So what I'm going to do, first of all, I want to put the deer like right down in here, but I want it to be facing the other direction. So what I'm going to do is do a Control T for transform, and then I'm going to right click and tell it to flip. Let me move that up. I'm going to flip horizontally. So now our deer's the other direction. I'll move it right over into here. And I'll probably make it just a little bit bigger. Holding down the shift key will keep the proportion. And we'll put it right, say, in there. Now, doesn't look too good like that, does it? So what we need to do is go up here where the deer actually exists, highlight that layer, and then come down here and click on the Add Layer Mask. So right here's the deer, here's the layer mask. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'm holding down my Control key and my space bar and just clicking. Going to turn on my paintbrush again, change the opacity to 100%, and I'm just going to paint. And what I'm painting is everything but the deer. And first, I'm really sloppy about it. I just want to hurry and get as much of this done as I can without a lot of fuss and mess. Now I make it bigger, and I make my brush smaller. And again, we're painting with black. Look over here. You see there's nothing but black showing right now. So let's make this brush smaller yet, because we want to get in here closer now. We're still not down to the nitty-gritty, but I'm trying to take care of stuff that's closer to the deer. And we paint all around it, making sure that we don't get anywhere around the deer itself, because our brush is still pretty big and it will, very easily get the edges and make the deer start disappearing. If I press the letter X, I can paint with white and bring that right back again. So I switch back to black with the letter X. And we keep painting up here, but not again. Don't get on the deer yet. Alright, now we need to come in closer. So I'll make my brush a lot smaller, and I want to firm up the edges of the brush. I don't want it to be so soft. So I click up here on the brushes, and I'm going to make the hardness about 28%. And see how much harder that brush area is now. So I'm going to go ahead and just keep painting and not go into the deer. And this is so much easier to do if you've got a graphics tablet. And I'm doing it the way most of you are probably having to do it, so I'm not cheating. I'm just using my mouse. Also, something to look for on your defaults on Photoshop. Sometimes if you click on right here where the brushes are, it brings up all of the brush information and all the brush controls. Make sure none of these things are checked except for smoothing. You won't really see that it makes much difference anyway. But a lot of times other of these boxes are checked, and they can really affect how your brush works. And so if you're not able to control it the way you think you should, that's where to check. So this takes some fine tuning. If you get sloppy, you get what you deserve. Take your time and try to do it right. It's going to make all the difference in the world if you do. Because what we're doing is making, I went too far. So all I have to do is switch with X, and I paint that right back in again. Press X, and let's go on down here. Now this is a straight line, so I can actually paint, hold down the shift key and click, and it paints in a straight line. We're Getting closer to the end. Be careful here. You might actually want to switch to a softer brush again so you don't cut into the deer's tail any. And then let's switch back to a harder brush again. We want to get rid of all the stuff that's not in the picture that we have already there. Don't worry about the odd grass right now. Just get the deer. Now here's another place to soften again. So let's take the hardness all the way to the left so we don't cut too much out. Go back harder again, or softer again. Sorry, I wanted this to be softer. I mean harder, and the other part to be more hard. It's looking fine. We've got it hard right now. Now let's see what it looks like. I realize we've got some grass from the other image there, but does it show? Not very much. So what we're going to do is move it exactly where we want it. See the artifacts that are there? There's some over here and over here. So all we have to do is hold down and make sure black is selected, get the brush, and make it a big brush. And we'll just paint away those things. Now move it again to see if there's a little bit of ghosting right here. See it? And up here. So let's brush again. We don't want to erase the deer's head. Let's try moving it again. Oh, we've got some here too. Move it again. Right there. Brush. Get smaller with the left bracket key. Move it again. I've still got, look at the frame up here. So brush again. V to move it. Just a little bit right there. Brush again. And I think you see that depending on where we move the deer, the grass actually blends in with the grass that's there. I'm going to trim a little bit more around the ears. So turn on the brush again. Let's make sure the brush is a little bit more hard. Interesting sound. And again, remember, there's a little green from the previous. I'm going to shift and click. Now let's zoom back out. Do a Control 0. I think we can say that deer passes muster. So you see the benefit of using layer masking. Now here's our deer layer, and you see all of the black that's down there, and you still see a lot of white. Okay, if I right click on this mask, I'm going to click on Disable Layer Mask. You'll see an X go through this, and then you'll see the rest of the image suddenly show up. So here's our red X, and there's the whole image. We didn't erase anything. It's all there. All we did was use a mask over the top of it. And if I go back over here and right click on that box again, Enable, and again it masks that back out. So the entire image is there, just like you see in the thumbnail. And I made the thumbnails bigger so you could better see them. You can see the shape right here of the deer. Little tiny deer there. Okay? So again, if I move that deer, if there's any artifacts, if you move it around, you'll see right there's a few more. So again, we can use our brush tool and mask those right off there. V for move tool again. I think that's got the majority of them. You can move the deer anywhere you want to. Another thing I like to do to kind of make it fit in its environment a little bit more is maybe move it into the brush just a little bit like that, and then I do some more masking. Let me enlarge that. And I'm going to make it look like some of these leaves are coming back over the top of him. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use my brush again, and I'm going to paint. Oops, that's an awfully hard brush. We're going to soften it all the way up, and we're going to change the opacity a little bit. Make the brush a little bit smaller. Just painting away a little bit of the deer. And you see now it makes it look like the deer is slightly underneath that tree. So we can make it look like it's in the environment completely. Now I can fine tune that, of course. Still on that layer mask, I'm going to switch to white, which will block. And now we just have the leaves that we want. Let's blow that up a little bit more here. Make my brush a lot smaller, and actually only get the leaves over the top of him. Now see if that doesn't look. Yeah. Just really looks like he belongs in that scene now completely. That's all being done with that layer mask. Again, let me disable it. You see what it looks like there. The layer mask is your best friend as far as compositing and making, bringing new elements in. We could put put an owl on a tree limb. We could bring in a flock of birds and mask out things and make them work. It's all in the power of these layers. And remember the stacking order, how important that is. If I turn this railroad crossing back on, then it's over the top. Oops. Got to be on the right layer that's highlighted. Whatever's at the top of that stacking order, and if it's turned on, it will hide whatever is the same size as we drag over. So the deer is now at the top of the stacking order because this layer is turned off. And now we can drag that wherever we want to, and the mask is going to stay in place. Notice we masked that backside of the deer out. Well, if we don't like where it was, let me undo that. If we don't like where it is, let me get back on the right layer again. We can bring that right back out again. If we say we want to put it right out in front, we turn on our brush again, and this time we paint with black. Oops, sorry, we want to paint with white. And got to be on, see, the highlight is not on the mask, it's on the image itself. So I'm just messing things up. Let me move it back over again. I keep going to the wrong layer. Alright, I just saw more telltale garbage on there too. But click and make sure this is highlighted. Now we brush. And see, we brought his backside back in again. And because I had the opacity turned down, it didn't come in all at one time. Okay? While we've got it this size, I'm going to go ahead and brush a little more of that telltale stuff off. It's just hard to see it with everything else on top of it. So what I'm going to do is turn these other things off. And see, we've got some green up there. It's not as bad as I thought it was. Let's turn everything back on again. Control 0. Let's move it back down here. And let's redo that mask over the back side here a little bit. So let's turn on the brush. Obviously I went too far. Meant to do that so I could better see what I had. Now I'm going to make my brush much smaller. Press X because I want to block what's underneath it. Make my brush a little smaller would help. Now let's zoom back out, and we've made it look like it's in its environment more all the time. And remember too, we can still bring back the stuff that's around the deer right here. Here's the mask that's controlling that. So we can still bring back all this we want to, and just maybe leave that back there blurred. Make that a little more subtle transition. Now we have a nice pleasing image to show our friends and relatives. All right, I'll talk to you all later. I hope this explained to you layer masking and compositing a little bit. We're going to talk about compositing more with another image, but I think this hopefully gives you a good example of layer ordering, how the stacking affects what we see, and also masking. Talk to you all later. Bye-bye.